if Warner gets going, Australia are almost guaranteed a big score. I think Kohli is probably the best batsman of this era. He's 36 years of age. Have a look at how he was running between wickets. On the other side, Pat Cummins, as I said, he's a very inspirational player.
Hello and welcome to Outside the Rope, looking at a blockbuster 50-over World Cup final coming up on Sunday between Australia and India. A very daunting prospect for the Aussies up against the unbeaten host nation in front of a raucous crowd in Ahmedabad. You'll see it all here on 9, of course, from 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Always wonderful to talk cricket with the great Ian Chappell, who joins me. Great to see you.
Thanks, Matt. You better say men's final too, mate.
It is the men's final, and, well, of course, the Australian women dominate their respective game as well. The 8th time Australia has featured in a World Cup final, which is quite a remarkable effort. It's actually double that of the next best, England and India.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's a bit of an indictment on the game because they're the three powerhouses. But Australia's record, this is the 8th time in the final, so 7 they've been in and they've won 5. So they do have a history of handling the big occasion, and I think that's one thing. That probably in their fielding will be a couple of their advantages going into the final.
So there is the history of the previous one-day international World Cup winners. It actually goes back a little further than that, and I'll speak with Ian about the first ever World Cup final all the way back in 1975, where he captained Australia up against the West Indies. Some wonderful individual matchups to have a look at as well. But can't wait to see that game, as I say, on 9, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. The Australians, Ian, after 2 games, were the bottom of the table. It's been quite a reversal.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you knew about Australia was that wasn't going to continue to happen. But sometimes a kick up the bum can be a good thing, and I think in this case it was definitely a good thing. Other times teams can disintegrate, having had a couple of losses. But I think, this Australian team is mentally pretty strong, and they showed that in coming back from being on the bottom of the table. And 2, despite what a lot of people think, I think that Pat Cummins is a good captain. He's inspirational, and I think that he helps to get the best out of this side. And certainly their form in that game against South Africa, I know it finished up very tight, but look at the way Australia fielded in that first session. They fielded their backside off, and you don't do that for someone that you don't have much feeling for. They have, I think there's a big feeling for Pat Cummins, and they all admire him as a captain.
Yes, indeed. And you point to the fact that Australia was able to turn it around. There was no panic in the camp either, it seemed. They took the mentality that it is a tournament. It is a long tournament. It's seemingly been going on forever at the moment, but the Aussies have got through to the final where they wanted to be at the start.
Well, the first thing in a tournament is you've got to get to the semi-final, and I think that's probably how Australia looked at it. How many do we need to win to get to the semi-final? They did that. And then the other thing you're looking for in a tournament is you want to have a final between the 2 best teams, if you can. And that's what we've got here, because I think India and Australia are the 2 best teams. Now what you're hoping for, unless you're a Indian urger, and there'll be plenty of them at the ground, but what you're hoping for then is a very good game. And on paper, there's every reason why this should be a really good game.
And highlighting that are these head-to-head matchups. Now, they are mouth-watering clashes. Virat Kohli is the leading run scorer in the World Cup, over 700 runs. You write him off at your peril. He's such a wonderful player, bringing up his 50th one-day international century in the semi-final. And we haven't quite seen the best of Steve Smith so far.
No, we haven't. But let's go back to Kohli for a start. I mean, he doesn't anymore, but there was a point well into his career where he averaged over 50 in all 3 formats.
Yes.
Now, that's a remarkable performance. I think Kohli is probably the best batsman of this era. I like his attitude. I heard him interviewed about batting, and I think he's got a terrific approach to batting. So I'm not surprised that. And I guess the other thing to look at is his fitness. He's 36 years of age. Have a look at how he was running between wickets. He's obviously put fitness right up there. Steve Smith, he's an important man in this Australian side, even though he hasn't played his best. He plays spin better than anyone else in the team, and that might be really important in the final. But Steve Smith tends to play his own way, and I think that's also important. But to me, one of the crucial guys for Australia will be David Warner at the top, because if Warner gets going, Australia are almost guaranteed a big score. And if you can get a big score and you bat first, that's pretty important.
On the flip side of that, his opposite number, Rohit Sharma, who is on screen there, while he's made significantly less runs in the tournament than Virat Kohli, there is an argument he's been maybe the player of the tournament, the way he's gone about batting at the top of the order. Look at that strike rate, nearly 125.
Yeah, he's a crucial man for India. Now, if he comes out in the final and does what he did in the semi, which is attack from the outset, that sort of sets the platform for the rest. I think with India, they really can't afford to be going gung-ho right from ball one, because the last four in that Indian batting lineup are almost gimmies. So, whereas Australia, I mean, they got up with Stark and Cummins batting at the end, but they can all bat a bit down the line. Stark is quite useful with the bat. Cummins is quite useful with the bat. Both of them can hit. So Australia can afford to go a bit harder early on, knowing that they haven't got a tail end who you can just brush aside. Whereas India, you could just brush them aside. So that's where Kohli becomes important for India, because Kohli will play his way and he'll take his time and build the innings slowly. And I think that's where, Rohit, his attitude comes in. If he attacks and he gets away with it, that then allows the other guys to play with a bit more freedom.
Yeah. So the Australian fast bowlers relished some favourable conditions in the semi-final against South Africa. I could almost guarantee there won't be anything in it for the quicks come the final at Ahmedabad. Notwithstanding that, Pat Cummins obviously a key ingredient. His average 37 is far above his career average. On the flip side of that, Mohammad Shami off a 7-wicket haul against New Zealand.
Yeah, Shami's been bowling really well for a long time without a lot of luck on occasions. Suddenly the luck is starting to go his way. He got 7 in the semi-final. And you
in a match where there was nearly 800 runs scored, he got 7 wickets.
And you don't get 7 without a bit of luck. So it's starting to turn in his favour a little bit. But he's a damn good bowler. And look at, every time you see the ball go down, that seam is sitting up. He's a master at controlling the seam. On the other side, Pat Cummins, as I said, he's a very inspirational player. And I think the other thing about Cummins that's really important is he has that knack of getting a wicket when you really need one. And I think the Australians know that about Pat Cummins. I think he knows it about himself. And forget his average, forget his strike rate, all those things. In the final, as he was in the semi-final, he'll be a crucial man for Australia.
What about Adam Zampa? Was harshly treated by the South African batsman in a low-scoring semi-final, particularly David Miller, who made a magnificent century. But he's the second leading wicket taker so far in the World Cup, and he's opposite, with respect to spin bowling anyway, Ravi Jadeja, one of the rock stars of world cricket.
Yeah, Jadeja, if there's a little bit of turn there, he could be dangerous, particularly against Australia, who have, that's one of the downsides with Australia. They've already shown they're vulnerable against spin bowling. And I think they're extremely vulnerable against good left-arm orthodox bowlers. Now, if Jadeja is getting a little bit of turn, he could be a big problem. Zampa, maybe I'm biased because, I think if you use your feet and play spin bowling well, you shouldn't have too much trouble with Zampa. but he troubles guys because they don't pick him, they don't play spin bowling all that well. And I'd love to know who decided that using your feet was more dangerous than reverse sweeping. I mean, that is the greatest load of codswallop I've ever heard in my life. But the thing about using your feet is you get into a position to hit the ball where you want to, not where the bowler wants you to hit it. Now, if they allow Zampa to bowl the way he wants to, then he'll be a problem. But if the Indians are good enough to attack him and use their feet well and hit the ball into gaps, then they could negate Zampa in a hurry.
Well, they're such brilliant players of spin bowling generally, aren't they?
Well, yeah, that's been a bit overblown of late, I think. They're not as good as I think they used to be,
okay,
but they are still better than anyone else. And, if they do play spin bowling, and Zampa in particular, if they do play him really well, that'll be a problem for Australia.
What about Glenn Maxwell's role with the ball so far throughout the tournament? I think his economy rate's under 5 and over in a World Cup where bat has trumped ball pretty much at every corner. That's good going.
Oh yeah, he's and it's interesting to read about him. I read a piece by Aaron Finch the other day, and Finch roomed with him and obviously played a lot of cricket with him for Victoria, and he said none of this is an accident. He works really hard at practice. So once you know that, you understand better why Maxwell is bowling really well, bowling thoughtfully, and I think that's been a big part of his bowling, has been, the thought that he's put into it. So he could be crucial, particularly if the Indians get hold of Zampa. They're going to really need something from Maxwell down the other end. But it's got to include taking wickets. And here's the thing about 50-over cricket, which I think is a damn good game. But if you don't take wickets through the middle overs and you've still got the best batsman playing near the end, last 10, you could be chasing anything. So you've got to keep getting wickets so that when you get down to those final few overs, you're bowling to the tail end. And at least you know that way, one, you might get them out, and two, they're probably not going to do a lot of damage to you. So if you haven't got rid of the best players by those last 10 overs, good luck, you could be chasing anything.
Yes, it's certainly a big task facing the Australians. It will be a full house at Ahmedabad, and India hoping to go through this World Cup undefeated at home. That would be quite an achievement. Let's take a little break, but on the way there, Shami and Chappell brilliance from the archives.
Shot he was attempting early on. Well, a shortish ball, warmer upper, and Chappell hits that well off the back foot. That's 4 runs, a fine shot. Short, and that's a good shot from Chappell. 4 more. No ball and short, and 4 more. Great shot, Ian Chappell. Bowling to Ian Chappell. Full toss, hits that well beautifully off his toes. 4 runs. Yeah, come on. Fine shot. Good shot. And that's it. Downer trying the bouncer, and Chappell has reached 100.
Oh, seen them like beach balls, Chappelli.
Few hook shots there, mate. Simon O'Donnell, I used to have this argument with Simon when he was commentating with Nine, and he used to say to me, did you ever play a shot off the front foot? So
we didn't get the chance. They were bowling halfway up the pitch most of the time.
Well, that's what I would say to Simon about that. I mean, there wasn't much point getting on the front foot to Joel Garner and Michael Holding, Andy Roberts, because you were going to get plenty of short stuff.
I'm so glad we showed that vision because it dovetails nicely into the first World Cup final in 1975, which was known as the Prudential World Cup. So it was sponsored back then.
Yeah.
But not many people realise that World Cup cricket goes back that far. And Australia played the West Indies in the final 1975 and England in a 60-over aside game.
Again, going back to my point about the 2 best teams getting to the final, that was the case in 75. West Indies and Australia were the 2 best teams. and then you hope for a great final, which that one was. And part of the reason why it was a great final is because both teams attacked. And the West Indies got us by about 17, I think, runs. We finished at 20-9 at night. So I reckon we might have got 2 more overs in at absolute best because the light would have been gone. And I think the next one, so 79, I think that was 60 overs. And then 83 maybe, they went back to 50 overs. And in part that was because, I think, of the light. They were worried about the light. But the first 3 were all played in England, and to me that was the only place they could have played them, because that was where you could get reasonable crowds for games that didn't involve England. But if you'd have played it in Australia or anywhere else, you wouldn't have got those crowds. But then when India won in 83, that's when it sort of really blossomed in India. The 87 final went to India, and then it became a more of a worldwide game where you could attract crowds in different venues. So that was one of the good things. I'm amazed with that stat you had about 92 being the first World Cup final. So wasn't it called the World Cup until then?
I believe so. Yeah. Well, I think it was the World Cup, but I think the reason being, back in 75, there was only a limited number of teams playing, and of course South Africa was still omitted from international sport at that stage. So 92 actually was South Africa's return, which made it a fully fledged World Cup, if you will. Interesting, I'm just having a look at the scorecard here from 75, and people talk about the rapid scoring rates and technology. Clive Lloyd got 102 off 85 balls.
Don't remind me, please. Lloydie belted hell out of us. And, you know, I mean, Lloydie, Viv Richards, there's 2 names I can bring up straight away. Their strike rates were fantastic even then. And, you see, Viv used one of those old bats, which were good bats, but they were not like they are now. He hit Baldock from Tasmania in the head.
Well,
with one of those old ones. So, and that's the reason why cricket administrators need to look at the modern bats and worry. Sure, you need to worry about the imbalance, but there's also the health aspect.
Well, I wanted to bring you to that point, actually, because this World Cup has been undeniably dominated by bat over ball, as we touched on before, and probably going to the subcontinent where there's nothing in the pitches anyway. That was always going to be the case. There's been nearly 700 sixes hit on grounds where boundary ropes have meant the grounds are a lot smaller. You're dealing with remarkable technology by way of cricket bat manufacturers. I mean, these things are featherweight but that thick. Do we have to address this? I mean, who would want to be a bowler in the modern era, given what's happened at this World Cup?
Well, I mean, if you look at one thing, the improvement in bats and the smaller boundaries, now that immediately tells you that the people who are in charge of these things don't know too much about cricket. Because if you understand the balance between bat and ball, that is a total imbalance in favour of batsmen. And if you look at all the law making, most of that is aimed in favour of the batsman. So yes, it is something that needs to be looked at. And here's another point which I'll bet you they don't understand. Why did chucking and a lot of the illegal bowling techniques come about? Because of that imbalance. You know, you imagine, let's take Harold Larwood, who was obviously a very fine bowler. Jardine was a smart captain. Jardine goes to Larwood and says, mate, you know that little so-and-so who belted the hell out of you in England in 19th, you're going to bounce the living daylights out of him in Australia. Do you think Harold's going to say, oh no, mate, I'm not going to do that? He's just come up out of the mines. Does he want to go back down the mines and breathe in all that bloody coal dust? No, he wants to stay, and so he should, a professional bowler. So that's how bodyline came about. But chucking started because, in essence, because the bowlers said, we're sick of getting hammered by the batsman. We're going to do something about it. So, you know, I'll bet they don't...
why does the people that run the game think that people only want to see batting dominate? I mean, there are two facets in terms of disciplines, batting and bowling. I mean, the World Cup semi-final, we saw Australia beating South Africa, a lower scoring game, but as someone who observes the game closely, a far more absorbing game than anything else we'd seen before.
Now, that was probably a little too much movement there for the bowlers, but it showed you what the best aspects of cricket, which is when the bowler's got a chance. If the bowler's got a chance, you generally get a very good game of cricket. And I think that's what the average cricket fan who understands the game, that's what he wants. But when I made the point about these smaller boundaries and improved bats, somebody said to me, but that's not what television wants. They want all these sixes flying everywhere so they can put up a chyron or a stat that says 650 sixes. And so you've got to ask the question, is that why big television rights come in for the game of cricket? Because these sixes are flying. And is that why the administrators are shortening the boundaries and improving the bats and virtually saying, bugger the bowlers? So, that's but it's a problem. The imbalance is a big problem.
Yeah, and certainly with respect to the bats, I mean, that's got to be addressed. We're only under a month away from the first test match of the summer here in Australia, which is exciting for all Australian cricket fans. It'll be great to see the Aussie Test team back out on the park. The first assignment is Pakistan, who are a very talented team, but they've just lost their captain. Babar Azam has stood down after the World Cup.
Yeah, that's a pity. I think Babar's a very good player. I mean, he won't be. He's not leaving the Pakistan side, and maybe they can find a better captain. But it's typical of Pakistan. There's
always a bit disarray around the camp,
they change captains. And the other problem with Pakistan is they don't have a great record in Australia. Even when they had good sides and blokes, who could bat and bowl, and they've got some good quickies at the moment, but the bounce of Australian pitches has always troubled them. And if you look at the Australian side, they might be on the wane a bit, particularly when Warner goes, but they've still got a very good attack, and it's a good pace attack. So, Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, those blokes will worry Pakistan with that extra bounce.
You mentioned David Warner. He's flagged the Sydney Test as his departure from Test cricket. Who's next in line to take his place? Let's have a look at some of the candidates here. There are some compelling cases being made in first-class cricket, particularly Cameron Bancroft, who is making a lot of runs. Matt Renshaw, I know you're a fan of him. Henry Hunt has done well for South Australia. Marcus Harris has obviously had his chance. The one down the bottom there is Will Pucovski, who everyone knows is just a prodigious talent but has struggled to put consistent cricket together over the last 24 months. Who are you going with?
Well, if you've got a coin, you can throw it in the air. Now, Bancroft is probably making the best case at the moment. The problem is, one, he's 31, and two, he's making a lot of runs in Shield cricket, and Shield cricket is a much diluted competition nowadays, so that's difficult. Out of that list, Pucovski is far and away the best player. But do you have the guts as a selector to pick him when he's had, 10 concussions? And are you going to be the one who picks him?
I think that's become less an issue, though, the concussion stuff.
No, it's not less an issue at the moment, because to me he's got to play a full season without getting another concussion.
Yeah.
And then I'd think about picking him. Because, go back to this point, if you're a selector and you pick him, let's say he gets concussed, because Pakistan have got some good quickies. Someone could hit him, he gets concussed again, so who do they start blaming? Do they start blaming the selection panel for picking him? I would say to Will, mate, you're a good player, we want you in the team, but you're going to have to play a season of Shield cricket without getting conked on the head, and then we'll think about picking you.
He's back in the Victorian setup pretty consistently now, so let's hope he can make some consistent runs, because there's no doubt... he's potentially a 10-year Test player, isn't he?
But have a look where he's batting for Victoria at the moment. He's batting 3. He's not opening. And, you see, here's another thing. I don't know who I think Dean might be one of the other openers, Harris obviously. But if I was an Australian selector, I'd be saying to the Victorian selectors, You think Dean's going to play for Australia?
That's right.
No. Well, why isn't Pekovski opening? Bat Dean at 3, not Pekovski. Ridiculous.
Yeah. The other issue too is Usman hasn't got long left, so we're going to be looking for 2 opening batsmen shortly. Is there someone around Australian cricket you've seen in the last little while that could spring a surprise this summer, or anyone that you're a fan of that flies under the radar?
Well, 2 points I'd make there. You have a look at the list of players who are making runs in Shield cricket don't do it just 12 months, do it 3 years. And the trouble is you're seeing all the older blokes, Gawajas, those sort of guys, they're Hanscom, they're all at the top of the list. And so, I'd be saying to myself, well, where are the young blokes piling up runs? And the second thing is, I'd like to see a lot more 18-year-olds coming into first-class cricket. I've had blokes say to me, oh, my son's a good player. How old? Oh, he's 21. Who's he playing for? Oh, Manly thirds. What the hell's he doing in the thirds? If he can play, what's he doing in the thirds? If you tell me he's in the thirds, I know pretty well that he's not that good.
With the greatest of respect to all the Manly third graders watching us.
And the other thing I could virtually say to him is, mate, if he's in third grade at 21, he ain't playing for Australia. But to get one 20-year-old in your Australian side, how many have we had? Ricky Ponting, Michael Clark, probably Steve Smith. Not many others. Not many others. But to get one, you've got to have probably 5 or 6 at least, because not all of them succeed. So I just don't think there's enough of pushing the really good young cricketers. Push them, throw them in the deep end and see if they can swim. If they swim, throw them in something's a bit deeper. And you keep doing that until they either hit the ceiling or they reach the top. But do it at a younger age. I mean, I know the game has changed a lot, but I still think there's a place for good young players, and they're exciting. People, if you hear about a good young player, somebody says, oh, Pekovski, let's say, he's a really good young 18-year-old. You want to go and watch him play and make up your own mind. Do I think this guy can play or not? So that's just one reason why we need to see more young players given a chance.
Cameron Green's a great example. He's only still very young, but he's actually not currently in the Test team. He was left out for Mitch Marsh in England. So undoubtedly you'd like to see him back for the first Test this summer.
Yeah, I think you might even get to the point with the Australian side where you play the two.
Yeah.
Play Green and Mitch Marsh. One of them will have to be bowling pretty well. Mitch Marsh's bowling used to be pretty good. I think it's, he's had a lot of injuries. It's probably declined a bit. But the main thing is they've got to hold their place in that side, in the middle order, as a batsman.
Manly are a very good grade club, by the way.
Yeah, but if you're in third grade at 21, mate, you're not playing for Australia.
I'm just, for all the Manly players out there, we send our regards.
They won the club championship last year.
They're a very, very good club. Can you see Australia causing an upset here in the final? They're going to be mighty hard to beat. They have been absolutely superb from the start.
Well, that in itself is a bit of a jinx, because you've got to go through the whole tournament undefeated. Not an easy thing to do. So they've only got one game to go. India, definitely the favourites. But what I'd say is if Australia play their absolute best and field like they fielded against South Africa, if they do that and India make a mistake or two, Australia can beat them. And Australia would do that probably on the basis of Warner playing really well, and that they'll bowl well, particularly those quickies. But I think India have to make a mistake or two and Australia have to play at their best.
All right, well, it is a powerhouse World Cup final. You'll see it here on 9 from 7 p.m. Sunday evening. That's Eastern Daylight Saving Time, and it is the two nations that have been undoubtedly the standout throughout the tournament, and they're fighting it out. Can Australia win a 6th World Cup? It would be a great achievement should they do so. Ian Chappell, always great to chat.
Pleasure, Matt. Thank you.
That's outside the rope. Enjoy the World Cup final on Sunday night.
With the summer of tennis right around the corner, Wide World of Sports has every angle covered.
From match highlights, press conferences and every breaking news story, Wide World of Sports is your home of tennis.
So click that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing this summer.